You are listening to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast. I'm Michael from Arizona. With me always are my good friends.
Jay from the hills of Texas.
And AK Mike in Texas.
And Shannon G in Mesa AZ.
And I have to be honest with you, we got a great show tonight, but I have to be honest, I'm in Arizona. I mean, I'm not in Arizona, I'm in Colorado. So, I'm not in Arizona. I'm in Colorado. We're visiting family, but we're excited that the two guys, Mike and AK Mike and Jay, are together. They're down in Texas, I think.
Yeah.
So, I guess you came down to visit, Mike.
Yes, I did. I had a long weekend and decided to take advantage of that and came down to visit Jay.
Well, that's awesome. And I understand you brought something with you.
I did. I brought my birthday present down. Figured since I failed and I would have somebody to fly with, that this would be a perfect opportunity to give it a shot and try to, one more time, get it in the air.
Yeah?
So that's what we did. We put
good.
it together, made sure we had to go through the programming process again. So we figured out that because I didn't use the gyro the first time, we did some more checking on how to make that work. And so what I learned was, one, the default setup doesn't just work, unfortunately, because each plane and receiver and servos are all different. Mm-hmm. So that was the first sort of realization I had. The second was that I didn't know what I was doing, but we already knew that, so that's fine.
Yeah.
And then the third one was, after I figured out the steps, then it became super, super easy to do. So it was really just a matter of really understanding. Now, Jay and I spent some time looking for videos on how to set this thing up, and all the videos that we've found sort of skirted around the issues that we were having. None of them were troubleshooting. None of them were talking about how do you manage the gyro settings, et cetera, et cetera. And even the manual for the gyro that I'm using was sort of cryptic, along with the screen instructions. It was sort of cryptic. It gave information that was useful, but not quite enough, right? So we were sort of struggling. So then it became a trial and error approach, which sucks when you don't know what you're doing. And so, as you know, Mike, I called you to find out how to set it up. And you started talking me through some steps. And that's when I learned what I needed to know, what I really needed to know in order to make the changes that needed to be made.
Yeah. So
what I discovered is if when I do this, the next time I do this, the way I will do it is very specific to a process as opposed to a specific gyro. And so I broke it down to sort of these basic steps. That is, deal with the gyro first, and then the output of the gyro to the receiver, and then how the receiver manages that channel. Those are the three basic steps.
Okay.
So it's possible that the last two steps are all the same and it doesn't really impact it too much, but they are separate in the sense that how they come to my particular radio and how it manages it. And it's also specific to the gyro in terms of how it manages and deals with for different receivers. I don't know the technical details about all that stuff, so I can't really speak towards it, but I'll tell you that the steps I took were successful repeatedly after, like, one of the situations was the servo I had in there was kind of crappy, and Jay loaned me one of his.
Jankety is the technical term.
Jankety. It was jankety. My servo was definitely jankety. It's
with a capital G.
Yes. I spell it with a J, but
Webster
J,
put
but,
that in the
but J
dictionary.
spells it with a G. Yeah, exactly. So what I had to do was first make sure that the gyro was producing the correct results for my plane. So once I mounted it into the plane, and I had oriented in the direction in which I thought I needed to be oriented in, then I could figure out as I rolled the plane that the surfaces were behaving correctly. And since they weren't, I had to make a path to figure that out. So as I tilted the plane left, as you're looking down the nose of the plane from the back, the right aileron needs to come up. More importantly, the left aileron needs to go down.
Correct.
Yeah, the left aileron needs to, right.
Yeah,
so more importantly, the left aileron. Yeah, exactly. So it's important to focus on the left side. And once I determined that the left aileron wasn't working correctly, it was going up instead of down, I just clicked on the reverse aileron gyro setting. On my particular case, it has a reverse. In your particular case, for Demon, for example, it has something like a 180-degree roll or some kind of thing like that, if I remember right. And so it depends on your gyro and how it deals with it. In my case, it has just a reverse. So I reversed that aileron. Now the left and the right ailerons are behaving properly. So once that's straight, and this is the technique that you taught me basically, Mike, when we were going through figuring this stuff out, is you worked on the left aileron and you made that work first. And then since the right side was behaving properly when using the ailerons, all I had to do then was check the elevator. And once I did that, if I pulled up and both of them went down, that means the elevator needs to be reversed. And that happens to be the case in my plane. So both the aileron gyro and the elevator gyro needed to be reversed. And once I did that, everything worked properly. From the gyro's perspective.
Right.
Now, what happened was I pushed the stick left. Right? So the right aileron should come up, and the left aileron should go down. Or vice versa, sorry.
Vice versa, yeah. If you push it to the left, the
left elevator should come up, right. And in this case, it did not. So I had to reverse the aileron servo on the output of the
radio or the radio.
Of the gyro. So it's outputting this value to the gyro. From the gyro to the receiver, right?
Yeah, because that's two separate sides.
Yeah, that's right. And then once I figured that out, then I had to go to my radio, and once the sticks were wrong, I had to go and change one of the channels. I think for that, in this case, it turned out to be the elevator channel, to be reversed. And so I had to make that progression through in order to get all that stuff working. Right. So once we got that settled out, then everything's good. So I would say that that's a process that's repeatable on any gyro. The problem is you have to know where to make the change. For example, on the aileron gyro reversing, for example.
Correct.
So once we got that done, then we took it to the field. It was early in the morning, Friday morning, and so we went and got to the field, and we decided that we were going to, because it was working so well on the table, we decided we're going to start the plane in gyro mode. We were going to fly it in gyro mode.
It was just acting as a basic gyro.
Right. And so we launched it, and it just wasn't flying right. And when I hit the throttle off, it took off pretty reasonable. Then it started like wobbling, and when I hit the throttle off, it just nosedived into the dirt. We don't know why. We ended up breaking the nose.
We know.
We know now. It's true. We do know now. And it nosedived into
at the time you didn't know, though, right?
No, we know now because we spent some time. Yeah, so we brought it back. We fixed it up again. So this is the second time I've crashed it. And we were driving out of there, and I was like, Mike's going to give me crap about turning on the gyro before we flew without it. Right, Jay? He's like, no, Mike won't say anything. He's like, no, he's going to say something. And so, and really, that's the right point, right? And the reality is, we shouldn't have flown it with it on there. That aside, so we fixed it, brought it back. Now we have a plan to not have the gyro on.
Okay.
And I'm going to fly it still. So this will be my third attempt. And it took off. It flew. And I got it up in the air. And things were going okay. But again,
Mike, you're leaving out some other, like, what type of a day was it? It wasn't super still, calm. The birds were chirping.
You can say it was windy, and that might have impacted it. But at the same time, it just wasn't operating well. Again, even though Jay was there, the communication about what I needed wasn't going well. Like, I wasn't doing a good job communicating to him about what I needed, and we just couldn't get together. And the thing got away from me, and when I couldn't turn it back to us. So it ended up going, I would say, for the best description is into the trees, which is a bunch of trees. Yeah, the trees behind us as we fly. Luckily not to the river. I think
started heading to Wynn's house.
Yeah, to Wynn's house.
Oh yeah.
And so then I cut the throttle, and then I tried as best I could to manage it all the way to the ground. Of course, I don't know where it's at and what's going on. For all I know, it's hit the 10 trees and it's a big pile on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So we went back there. Luckily, the radio was still on because I could hear it say, signal acquired, signal lost, signal acquired. So we knew we were headed the right direction, right? And then he goes, "What's that thing laying by that, the green building over there?" It's like, "Oh, that's the plane." So I went over there, and it truly barely had any damage for what should have been a disastrous result.
Right.
And so it was broken. We had to go back and fix it. And something else happened. I can't remember what, but we ended up going back. So now it's Saturday morning. We fixed it, made some corrections, whatever. We thought we had some chat about what was going on and what we might be doing differently.
There wasn't that much damage to the
that's
plane.
right. That's right. It wasn't that bad. We fixed up the field, right? And so now it's like, that's it, Jay. I'm not flying anymore. That's 3 times. I can't fly this plane right now. Right now, I can't fly this plane. It's not ready for me. It's ready for somebody else. And so I've got him nervous, right? Because it's windy. It isn't exactly calm, but it isn't exactly super windy. I mean, like,
I know it gets that way over at that field.
It's Texas windy, right?
Not there in the morning. It gets windy.
It's probably 10-mile-an-hour winds, maybe gusting to 15. Okay, I mean, really, it wasn't terrible. And then a couple of times we started yakking, and it's like, we better stop yakking and start flying because we're going to lose our weather.
Right.
So I was like, Jay, you got to fly it, and I know he didn't want to. Like, I know he didn't. He'll say he was okay with it, but I'll say he didn't want to. And I was like, look, dude, I can't fly it, so you have to fly it. And so he's like, all right. So we get in there, and he flies it. And, he's flying a lot better than I was because he's better at piloting than I am. And I was like, dude, you need I can see you're fighting left roll. So I started putting, trim in. Yeah. And we're just cranking it hard. And then he's like, I need up. Mostly I need up. So I gave him all the up elevator I could. He's like, yeah, I'm still fighting with the up. Well, that kind of explains the reason why the plane tanked into the thing. Now, we did check the CG before we flew it. And it was a tiny bit forward, right? It was a tiny bit forward based on where we put our fingers. But it was only a tiny bit. But that thing was hitting the deck. And based on what we put in for trim, which is all the trim up, he still had to fight it. So we know that the trim is off, that the CG is off on the markers for that plane.
So when we set up the flying wings, because this thing is a delta wing, right? It has the delta wing set up. Yeah. There is a little bit of reflex in the aft. Huh?
I said funny story.
Well, that doesn't matter right now. There is a little bit of reflex.
I'm getting ahead, obviously, right?
No. I mean, because that's not really important. The important thing is that it is nose heavy. Reflex would have helped a little bit, but it was nose heavy. Because even when we look at the center, even if we look at what would be considered reflex at this point in the ailerons, it still has to go a bunch more before the CG that they have in the plane is going to be good. So instead of fixing the travel, we're going to fix where the battery's placed and change where where the CG mark is, right?
Right.
Instead of doing all that, we're just going to move the battery back instead.
So this airplane is built for like FPV style flying. So is all the FPV gear behind the battery? Is that why they have it so far forward? Or
possible?
Yeah, that you could put a bunch of gear back there. I mean,
possible.
It's got two big bays, so probably most of the stuff goes from mid bay towards the rear because they have a rear hatch, and you can put most of the stuff.
But nothing in the thing says, "Hey, if you're not using video or FPV
move
gear,
the battery back." Right.
It doesn't say that. It doesn't say the CG's off or it's built for the whatever. So that's a really good point, Mike. That's probably what those CG holes are for, is for gear like that, and that makes sense. That makes sense to me, right? That makes some sense. So we're gonna do is we're gonna move the battery back, and we'll just do a new CG from that point based on what we've seen how the plane behaves.
So you basically flew it at this the Saturday with no gyro in it yet, right? I mean, you haven't turned the gyro on.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're just trimming it out. You're getting all that stuff ready to go without turning the gyro on.
We haven't turned the gyro on, and we have yet to turn the gyro on at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this is smart. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get it all tuned up without the gyro, because if you have the gyro on and you trim it, and then now the gyro is fighting the trim. So I totally get that part.
And we knew that was the case, but we just felt like the gyro was going to help us fly it in the front end of it, to keep it level.
I get that.
But I guess that would make, because it had such a hard left roll, that would definitely make a wobble in it too. Like it was looking like over gain.
No,
so that definitely.
It had too much gain in the thing.
Jay, I was just thinking now that actually might have been because of how much roll was actually in the plane. It would have wobbled like that because of the way the roll was, because the plane would go to its natural and then come back, and then go to its natural and come back, and so it would show a wobble instead of gain. Like that might not have been a gain issue.
I don't know,
because we never used the. Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say the gyro, whenever you plug the battery in, depending on how you have it, that gyro is going to memorize this is level.
Right?
So,
exactly.
So if it's Mike is right. If it starts to turn, it's going to correct itself. So if it's constantly rolling to the left, and then the gyro goes, "Hey, you're not level, and you need to go back to the right."
Yeah, and I wasn't putting any inputs in, but it was still rolling left. Exactly.
Correct. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what I think with the wall. But aside from all that, now that's really not relevant at this point, because we were operating it before we should have in that case anyway. So now we're at the point where Jay has fixed it. Now, what was interesting is, despite the fact that I flew that plane into the trees and it landed on the ground the way it did, the motor mount was fine. And Jay was bringing it back and landing it. He landed that thing what I would call very smoothly, and the motor mount broke.
Yeah.
And so it's
I can see that coming. I can see that coming. I just tell on your face.
I don't get that. Yeah, I don't get that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we put Jay put some fiberglass on it and some epoxy, and so now we feel like that motor mount's going to be more staunch than it was. Plus, we 3D printed a skid that was out there for this very reason, because if you put the thing on the ground, that motor actually drags on the ground. So if you hit it even a little bit nose up. Oh, Jay's got it here. I can't really see it because it's too close, but it's too close to the camera. Can't really see it.
Yeah, it was flat.
Yeah, there it is. There's the skid. That's the new skid. Yeah, and then the motor goes behind.
Well, that looks good.
And that's going to protect the motor a little bit better than what it had.
Right.
And so we feel like, plus it'll put some weight back there, Jay. I didn't realize, but I don't think that will change too much about what we decide to do with the battery and where it goes.
No, but you may want to be cognizant of the fact that you have something back there. I mean, wherever you thought you were going to move back, just move it back.
Well, I think we're still going to use a different spot on the CG on the plane itself. We're not going to use the CG holes. We're going to go back a little bit and use that because that's what we need. We need the CG to be back or forward. I don't know, whatever the other direction is.
If it's nose heavy, you got to move the CG back.
Right. Okay. Right. Thank you. Right. So that's what we're going to do. And we'll put the battery in and we'll see what happens. And of course, by now we'll also have the reflex added in there and the, trims set back to 0 now that we know where they're supposed to be set.
Right.
And we know we still need some more elevator. Yeah, we still need some more elevator, even still. So once we do that, I think we'll be a better set to manage this thing.
So
it might actually fly.
The airplane is relatively small. I mean, it's smaller than our wings, right? If you put the tough wing by it,
it's about a 24-inch. It's probably 20-inch span. It's not quite 24.
So the control surfaces on the wing though are slightly larger than this airplane. That's what I'm asking.
Slightly larger?
Yeah, the wing has a full span. Is it the same size or is it smaller?
It's most of the size of the wing, most of it.
It's
3 inches on either side.
Yeah, and the amount of that you have up there, Jay, that is reflective, where it's got that whatever eighth of an inch,
3 degrees or 5 degrees probably.
Yeah. So is that what it normally would require to fly straight and level at this point?
Yes.
Okay. I personally, whatever that measure that
we're gonna
distance.
Put that in mechanical distance in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So whatever distance you have here.
Yeah.
Between the body and the top of the aileron.
Yeah.
If you measure that and let's say it's like 3 millimeters.
Yeah.
I would move the battery back 3 millimeters.
Okay. And then make those things level.
And then level them down and fly it again. And if you're trimming it another up, then you can move. You shouldn't have to trim it a full 3 millimeters. But what you're doing is you're actually causing that to come back down. You're moving the battery back.
Yeah,
you just shove the battery back 6 millimeters and then level those. You may get something totally different.
We're not going to do that. Yeah, no, I get that. You're right, but I think we were just going to have to eke it back little by little. Is what we're going to do.
That's a good starting
back,
point.
3 millimeters back. Zero out the trims. Go 3 millimeters back. See what we need again. Go back more. And I know it's not a 1-for-1 like you're saying it is. It wouldn't be a 1-for-1, but I get why you're choosing that. Yeah, I get why you're choosing that. So, yep.
Yeah.
So that's
it's just
kind of
a
where
matter
we're at.
of, if you're having the nose come up that much, because that's really what you're doing with those surfaces going up like that. You're bringing the nose up that amount. And that means that you can move the battery back that same amount, and then that should bring it level. You would be able to fly
like a teeter-totter.
So we won't need all that elevator once the battery goes aft. We won't need elevator to bring the nose up.
I mean, there's a likelihood if we move back 3 millimeters, it's going to be nose light.
Maybe. It could be. So.
Yep.
I think
all we can do is move it back.
I think it's just curse, guys. I think you just need to get a priest and exorcism or something. I think it's just
not a bad idea.
One of those planes.
Yeah.
We're
power
so we should be able to
compel you. Yeah.
That's right. That's funny. The good news is that when I first got for today's episode, you guys were talking about it when I jumped on, and in my head, I just had this horrible feeling that this thing was just going to be this big ball of fiber, glue and foam, because it just it's a big ball. But I'm happy to hear that it didn't get, that you guys got to fly it a couple of times, and despite the kind of shenanigans going on, that it wasn't as bad as I had imagined it. Because when I hung up from talking to you, unfortunately he called me right as I was walking to the gate to go to work, but I'm talking to Mike, and then he's explaining all this stuff, and I could hear he's kind of frustrated, and I'm trying to be calm and try to figure out over the phone what he's telling me versus what I can visualize in my head. And I keep asking him to repeat stuff and, okay, switch this and do this. And then I had to go, and he's like, all right, fine. And then we'll figure it out. And I'm thinking to myself, I told the guy I was working with, I was like, oh man, I don't want to call back, because This just sounds like
but
I don't.
what's really
I didn't
interesting,
think
Mike,
I helped at all, but I'm glad I at least
but
something
what's really
kind of
interesting
triggered.
though, Mike, is that what you did help because it taught me something about how the elevons, like how to suss out what the elevons are supposed to do and how you're supposed to work.
Right.
So once I learned that, I just took that same process and I figured out, oh, I got to do the gyro first because the gyro seems to be the thing that was kept catching me. For whatever reason, I felt like I did everything else first. Like I set the outputs right and I set the radio right. And then when I looked at the gyro, it's like, it's not working. What's wrong? And so once I started doing the gyro first and made that work, because it's really a separate thing. There's really two pieces, right? There's the gyro stuff, and it operates the surfaces in one way, and then there's the radio stuff, and it operates the surfaces in its own way. Two separate paths.
That's correct.
But I didn't really know that. Like that, it makes sense now that I went through that, but it's like it's not intuitive. It certainly isn't intuitive in the software I'm using, and it's certainly not intuitive for somebody who's never really. I've used one before, but the last one you and I set up at the fundraiser, that thing we just plugged it in, and it was working right. We did nothing. It was 11RX.
I think we had already set it up for another airplane prior to that, though.
Maybe so, but what I'm saying is that we didn't do anything. So for me, it was just like it should just plug in and work, right? That was my mindset. It should just plug in.
So just so you know, the when I got my L39 all ready to go, I had a very similar situation with the Demon, right? I hooked everything up and plugged it in, and the rudder was going the wrong direction. And I was frustrated as all get out because every time I would replug it in, I thought it was the receiver. I swapped out the receiver, I swapped out the servo, I swapped out the battery. And so when you get to that point where you've swapped out so many things, it's now totally confusing. I don't know what's going on now. I just start from scratch. So I start from the back, which is where the rudder servo was, and it was going backwards. And so I took the rudder servo out and I plugged it in and it was going the right way. I plugged it straight into my receiver. It was going the right way. Everything in the receiver to the servo was correct. As soon as I introduced the gyro, everything was going backwards. And I'm like, I do not understand. This is really frustrating. And so I kind of did the same thing. I stepped back. I called Barry. I was like, Barry, I'm having a hard time. And he walked me through it. Still didn't work, right? And so then I'm frustrated. I'm like, all right, well, this is just stupid. So I read the directions. I thought I was doing it right. Finally, I said, you know what? I got to go above my head because I've exhausted everything. And I went ahead and called the guys over at Demon, and I told him what was going on, and he did exactly what I did to you. Okay, you plug these in, what happens? And I go, well, it does this and this. And he goes, if you plug this in, what happens? And I go, this and this. He goes, oh, it's out of sequence. And so in the directions, when it double chirps, you're supposed to go to the left, right, forward, back, rudder's doing it. I turned it first and then let it double chirp, which put it out of sequence by 1. So when it got to the elevator, or when it got to the rudder had no idea what it was doing because I was already done with the sequence and it went back to neutral. So at that point, I was just like, you got to be kidding me, because I had already pulled out like 4 receivers out of different airplanes.
Yeah,
and I
right.
mean, I was just, and that, and like you, that's, I wasn't going to just go fly this thing and say, okay, something's not right. That's a lot of money to be flying around, with the turbine on the back of it. So once I did that and I got the sequence right, then it worked. And so normally, now you got to the same results, just kind of the way your head figured it all out.
Right.
But in reality, the gyro is taken out of the picture. Everything should work correctly. So you program from your radio, from the servo to the radio, make sure all of that's going well, then introduce the gyro. When you introduce the gyro inputs are from the receiver. So the receiver's giving correct inputs.
Right.
When you plug the servo in and they're opposite or wrong, then now you've narrowed it down to just there. And so I was frustrated because I was trying to figure out what gyro you had, and you have the Hobby, what's it called? The Hobby
A3 Super 4.
Yeah, the A3 Super 4. I think it's Motion sells it. And so I pulled the
Hobby
manual
Eagle.
up for that. Hobby Eagle, that's it. I pulled the manual up and I was reading the manual and I was like, hey, wait a second, this says you should do this, so I'm trying to follow along, and then I get a text that says I got it. And I was like, oh, perfect, so
Yeah, I did do it that way, Mike. I did do it the way you're talking about, but it just confused. Well, there are two things. It confused me because I thought once I had the transmitter working through the gyro, which then talked to the receiver properly, like all that stuff worked properly, it should be working. But, I'm sorry, it goes receiver, gyro, servos.
Correct. Servos.
It should be fine, but the gyro was separate, and I was like, how am I going to fix that? There's a setting on the basic screen, not on the gyro screen, but on the basic screen that says reverse to gyro. Gotcha. So until I found that, I was like really confused because I saw the daemon one, which is you just pick what the orientation is, and if it's doing reverses, you just change it based on that. Like I can't remember what I saw, but it's like a roll, something to do with roll, and there's a change in setting. So
yeah, there's actually a reverse. You can reverse the servo in the
reverse
in the
roll, right?
Well.
But
it's got an orientation and a reverse switch.
Right. And so in this case, though, it's just that reverse was on a screen I wasn't expecting it to be, and I didn't find it until you were like, it's got to be there somewhere. And I was trying to like do the calibration differently so that it would see the plane different, and it wouldn't do it that way.
It wouldn't do it.
And, it wouldn't do it. So it was like, this is just nuts. Like, what's happening? And then I just fell on that screen accidentally, and I go, what? Oh, this is gyro reverse.
Here it is. Yeah.
Son of a gun.
Well, there you go. Well, I'm glad it happened. Sometimes it just takes moving around and clicking on stuff. So,
yeah.
Well, I'm happy that I'm happy. What'd you say?
I was going to say also, if you listen to Spyro Gyra, that helps a lot too with gyros.
There you go. That's a good one.
What's that? Spyro Gyra.
It's a band. It's a jazz band.
Okay. Yeah. Well, clearly I don't.
Yeah, so clearly he didn't get that. I got it, Janet.
Yeah, if I had, I might have been able to do it sooner. No, it's fine. I mean, I get that I'm a music neophyte, but it's possible I would have got it right had I listened to them.
There you go. You never know. So, well, unfortunately, our time's up. I'm very excited that you guys are kind of getting to the the point where you can fly it again. I'm very interested. Hopefully, this next go around, we'll be able to hear some pretty exciting stuff. That you guys have kind of got it all figured out. But for now, we are out of time, so we're going to let you go. I'm AZ Mike in Colorado.
And Jay from the hills of Texas.
And I'm AK Mike in the hills of Texas.
There you go.
And I'm Shannon G in Mesa AZ holding down the fort for all of us AZers.
There you go. All for the AZ guys. Well, we appreciate you attending our listening to us, and send us an email at parkfirepodcast@gmail.com. And for now, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Let's fly.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please give our show a star rating and review, and feel free to email us your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com.